Internet land, ladies and gentlemen, this is your friend Charlie Hunter, and it looks strangely as if our guest today is in the exact same room as me, but he's not. Our guest today is the awesome Richard Russell Sneary, watercolorist extraordinaire from Kansas City, Missouri. Welcome, Richard.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Charlie. One of the only people that calls me by my name.
Richard.
As opposed to Dick.
Well, which do you prefer? I've never known.
I prefer Richard. Well, that's the way we introduced ourselves when we met. Wasn't it in 2011 in Easton?
Yeah, it was when we met. And I was going to talk about that. Yeah. I was going to talk about that a little, Richard. What year did you get on the circuit, as it were?
2011.
Really? That was your first year?
Yeah. So I'd done one little event in Kansas City here that year and won it. And so I think I had already applied to Easton by that point, because it was in like June. So just before. So
right. So let's, for people who may not be familiar with you, your background is in architectural illustration.
Architecture.
Oh, you were an architect.
Yeah.
It's that Stuart White who is the architectural illustrator. You're an actual architect. You actually built the things.
Yeah, I was actually an architect for decades. So I didn't practice it too much after the late 80s or the mid 80s, really.
What were you doing if you weren't practicing architecture?
Well, I was practicing it mostly from out of school. When I got out of KU in '65, I was up in White Plains, New York, working for Perkins and Will partnership up there, which was a huge architectural firm, several places in the country and around the world. I worked there for a year and a quarter or something like that. And then I came back to Kansas City and worked at, various places around here, and then went out on my own in '70 with two other partners. And we went from doing really big commercial projects and airports and stadiums and stuff like that to doing residential stick building stuff. So, and did that for 5 years till the '74-'75 recession. The big recession put us out of business, along with a lot of other architects across the country. As a matter of fact, professionally, it was the largest loss of jobs in the country. So, and then after that, I started teaching the University of Kansas and illustrating, because I'd done some of that to kind of give us a little extra money with the partnership, and kept doing architecture then until '85. And '85, I decided I'd dropped out of teaching because it was getting to be too much of a hassle in terms of getting help with grading and stuff like that, especially for young first-year kids. I taught first to third year usually. And, first year you have to have a lot of grading. They have to have a lot of feedback in order to make any headway. And nobody wanted to do that. So we parted company and I started doing illustration full time. So,
okay. So you were doing illustration full time through through
2000, and the last one I did was a year ago, and I haven't done more than half a dozen in the last 3 or 4 years. So
interesting. Well, I've already learned more about you than I knew previously. So, and for folks who may not be familiar with Richard's extraordinary work, I think we should dive right into looking at these paintings, because I think your work is stunning. Your sense of composition, of course, but your sense of light and your precision. Your work is simultaneously precise, yet has a gentleness and a real love of its subject matter. I think it comes through really, really well. I wanted to start with this one because this is Kansas, and you are from Kansas.
That's right.
And tell us a little about how this came about.
Well, this is on US Highway 24 between Lawrence, Kansas, actually, more like Kansas City and Manhattan, Kansas, where Kansas State University is Lawrence's Kansas University. But I travel that route quite often to do things with friends up there and do workshops up there through a friend for years. And, you know, and I passed this by one time when Susan and I were still together. We were traveling that road quite a bit. So, and there's tons of stuff like this all the way along. And I'm always mesmerized by the grain elevators and, you know, the farm stuff and the railroads. And, you know, it's always fun. So this one always appealed to me. I've done several. And so that's what this was. And it just, you know, happened to get it at the right time of day and took a bunch of pictures and a sketch or two. And, you know, came back. And I think it was a couple of years later, I actually started focusing on it. I did a smaller one, and then I did this one for an event at Kansas Byways event or something like that at Burger Sands and Memorial Gallery in Lawrenceburg, Kansas.
You were working in this situation. You were working from reference photographs and a sketch. Do you use the sketches
from a previous painting? From a previous painting.
Right. Okay. So you were looking at a previous painting and a sketch and photographs while you were working on this?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And which would you be consulting primarily as you're working on this?
Because I painted it once before, mostly that other painting. And, you know, then I check in on the photos and stuff like that. I usually take a lot of photos, quite often zoomed in, because, you know, when you take a photo, the color's only good for pieces of it. And the further you're away from it, the less use it is on smaller things. So I'll zoom in on things like the, you know, near where the truck is or something, which wasn't in any of the photos. And, you know, or the buildings behind it. And, you know, the things on the big grain elevator, I'd zoom in and take photos to see that'll give me better color indications. And
so it's more
like the memory, brings the memory back better. So,
right.
You know.
So it's more the color reference than the detail reference. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, the detail, you know, I mean, I picked that up as well, but I'm looking mostly when on the zoomed in stuff, I'm looking mostly at, you know, what that color's like, because the previous picture that was this one, you know, maybe a little wider, you know, didn't, you know, all that stuff was kind of too much shade, too much darkness, that kind of thing. So.
And so what is your basic palette for is your studio palette similar to your plein air palette, or are there significant?
Yes, they're pretty much the same. I have usually 18 to 24 colors on there. I'll have a lot of transparent ones. So I don't use things like yellow ochre because they're kind of a trick color. Yellow ochre is too much opacity in it, and the tendency is with lighter colors, you put them down first. You don't want yellow ochre down under things because it'll go to mud, anything on top of it.
Interesting.
So I use transparent, you know, maybe quinacridone gold, but mostly a gamboge or new gamboge, depending on whether it's M. Graham or Daniel Smith, and a light yellow that's azo or something on that order. They're both transparent. They have a little stain in them, but it's insignificant. And I'll use those kind of things in place of the ochres and the lighter colors. And then when I get to the ends, I'll pick up cadmium yellows or reds, and so because they'll set on top.
Interesting. Next slide, please, Betty Sue.
Mm-hmm.
And Dick, you can see the comments on the screen. It seems like well, Susan is watching, and Pam, and Tim Oliver from out there in Lubbock.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Pam. Hi, Tim.
And Beth is watching. Hi, Beth. Hi, Jeff. Hi, everybody.
Hugs to all.
Oh, a bunch of watercolorists. I got to be careful today.
You better be careful.
Careful.
We'll get you when you come down to Big Bend.
Once again, the gentleness and love of your subject matter comes through so strongly in this. What's the story on this one?
Oh, this story's completely unrelated. It's coincidental. This is in Ballinger, north of San Angelo, Texas, and all of us saw this, and I think it's been painted several times, but not this particular view. And I think this was 4 years ago or something. But I saw this car, and I started kind of looking at it, take some photos, and saw the note on the door, and it says 1974, I think, national champions on it, and it's Texas Western. Well, University of Kansas lost to Texas Western in the regionals to go to the Final Four. Texas Western was the first all-black starting five, and I think the whole team was black except for 2 white guys. And the guy in there that owns this place was the manager of that.
Huh.
And so I got to talking with him, and I was already drawing this thing, and and I went in later and talked to him quite a bit. But so I painted this out of memory of that lost game that we had. We had a last-second shot that they said JoJo White's foot was on the out-of-bounds line, and he was out of bounds, and it didn't count. Otherwise, we would have won. So we went through all those stories, but I so loved all of the stuff here and all the eclectic stuff that this fella, the manager, had, and he's about my age. So yes, I started painting it. So it was kind of a little love story of this subject matter. So I love the subject, and I love what inspired me to stay around and paint it. So.
You see, you're getting a lot of smart aleck remarks. Lon Brower asked if you ended up buying that car.
Well, that's the one I'm bringing down this time to Big Bend. I'll be driving down. We were able to find wheels for it. That's right.
Fair enough.
Well, I told them they could tune in and harass me if they wanted to.
Okay. Things I just want to point out to the audience. One of both the realism, your drawing skills are insane, and at the same time, the level of abstraction and the way you simplify your big forms is magnificent. On this one, I'm particularly moved by the colors and tones in the pavement in the foreground that lead us into all this delicious detail, and the harmony of colors you've got between the hub that the axle is resting on, to the trunk, to the light on the side of the building.
Right.
Just this beautiful harmony of work, as well as this wonderful dance of large and small shapes. Insane. Yes, says Beth. He is the best. Caggiano is watching too.
I saw that. Thanks, John.
He just has to be stopped. That's all I can say. So,
well, what are we going to do about him?
I don't know. He's just got to be stopped.
Nothing we can do about it.
Let's have the next slide, please, Betty Sue. Look at this one, ladies and gentlemen. Look at this one. Tell us about this. This is available. If you don't own a Sneary yet, maybe consider this for your collection. Tell us about this one, Richard.
Oh, this is Carrie Furnaces. I've painted it says number 6 here. I think I've actually painted about 8 of them. And I started doing this in 2007. Not this painting, but I started going there. David Shaunt, David.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you may or may not know David, and you certainly won't know his last name because it looks like sea salt or Cissant, but it's pronounced Shaunt.
C-S-O-N-T. So
he's a Pittsburgh watercolor.
He ran he's a good friend. I've known him for years. He's former president of the American Society of Architectural Illustrators. I think it was around 2007. At any rate, he had a convention there. So he got us into Homestead Ironworks, Carrie Furnaces in particular, on the north side or so of the Monongahela, east of Pittsburgh. Rankin is the location. And so I, we all fell in love with it. Stuart was there, Susan was there. Let's see, Beth wasn't there at that time, but she was 7 years later in 2014 when David ran a plein air event in Mount Lebanon, south of Pittsburgh. And we all went there. So I've been there twice to paint and, had a great time. And I took away so many pictures and drawings and, paintings that I had done that it was, it never leaves me. It's sort of in my blood, the steel belt, because I was born in Baltimore. I was always cutting across with my mom and dad to Ohio and Michigan to visit my grandparents, and always going through Pittsburgh. And I remember the black smoke and soot of the steel mills. And, it always impressed me. And when you walk into this place, it is amazing. The scale is unbelievable. That a person would disappear in this.
Mm-hmm.
Beth's painted there. Several of us have painted there. So
is it privately owned? Is it abandoned? Is it?
It's part of. Let's see. What's it? I think I put it on the information that I sent to you and Betty Sue. The Rivers of Steel, and you can look it up under Rivers of Steel, and you can look it up under Carey Furnaces, and it's basically Homestead Ironworks. But this is magnificent. So this is a lot of fun. So it's a lot about the rust, and and I paint a little differently on these that I do in studio, and I'll use a little more opaques to kind of blend things in. Especially you'll see it on the next one, but this one's a little more straight watercolor, not so much opaques, a few things in there.
And now, are you using a straight edge in studio work?
Hardly, unless I've got a really long line. I may have used, what do you call it? The oil painters use with a kind of a long straight edge, and I'll strike one line, maybe the top, second to top rail or so. That's about a third of the way down, somewhere where I get it started. But most of the time I freehand all of it. So, in these cases, I may have sketched it off of the photo anyway. So, that's easy. But if I was I've done several in the field. So
that's easy. That's easy, he says. What are you talking about? That's easy.
It is easy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is someone who's done a lot of drawing. Remember, draw. Always be sketching. Yeah. That's how you get to have insane skills like this. This is one of the things I love about this is it is both a painting about the structure. Again, the love of your subject matter really comes through in the way the colors are colors of gentleness and love, counterbalanced with the harshness of the nominal subject matter. And then you've got all these beautiful, really, really abstract passages where, it's almost like a Mondrian painting of the dark and light, that lattice work of the fields beyond the structure. Your decision, I assume there were some conscious decisions in how you kept the lighted area behind the structure very undefined. I mean, you've got color is providing the definition as opposed to real structure.
Yeah, sometimes, years ago, I probably would have put it in, but, I've sort of learned over time, probably tutored by Susan Lynn to some degree to keep it simpler back there, but it's always tough for me to do that. But this one was much easier. It's pretty much just light back there. So just enough color as it comes down to warm. Is right. So, but the color thing is what a friend of mine and he kind of, Mike Lind, a Chinese friend of mine that now lives in Taipei. And so I used to do workshops for Mike Lind's graphic workshops in Manhattan, Kansas a lot. And, he always referred to these color relationships, and I just used to mix colors in relationship to one another. You know, if you have something, you know, next to an object that's red, well, part of that red's going to bounce onto the object next to it. And so he called it color jump, which I like a lot better. So it's the colors melting in, like the one on West Texas Town, you know, with the foreground you thought was pretty interesting, was a lot about that color jump. Some of the color from the oranges in the car and the yellows and so on pulling down into it. And this is pretty much the same thing here. So I just, you know, not, you know, love yellow anyway. So it's really works great to give the warmth that I like in these things. So
Yeah, and then talk a little about how you then transition into the shadows. Let's look at the bottom right-hand side of this. You've got the oxides, the kind of what I'm reading as iron oxides, but then you get it goes to kind of green and purple. How do you manage that transition?
Yeah, it's obviously you don't want that as strong as some of the yellows and the more intense color and contrast. So you're trying to tone it down without killing it. So I usually will use a fan brush, and you can see all the brush strokes in the grasses. I'll usually use a fan brush down in there. It's kind of like a trick that some people using squeegees that I know. And so I do a lot of that, and I just pull things down back and forth in there, and I'll mix in ceruleans or a lavender or, you know, that whatever seems to feel right to it. Sometimes I get it wrong, I'll blot it out and come back. So, but that's kind of, you know, I'll just kind of pull it in. I'll let it overlap the others a little bit sometimes. So,
well, for those of us who are not primarily watercolorists, who live more by what John Singer Sargent described painting in watercolor as painting in a perpetual state of emergency. How you manage to do this? It remains alchemy. Claire did. I believe Claire said this was not done in the studio. This was not done in the studio. No, this was done in the studio.
This was done.
Yeah. So if it was done from life, he would not be a human. That would not be.
I have some. I didn't give you any of those that I've done of this, so, but I have done some. So
let's have the next one. Let's have the next one. So this is another one from that same series.
And this one is.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the
wrong one. Do the next one.
No, I took the other one out.
Oh, well, that was the one that was actually available, I think. No, you're right. No, this is the one that's sold. This is darker. I've got one that's more color in it. Not a lot more color, but enough more that you can see the difference. And I was interested in seeing what it does. But
this is another studio piece, right?
This was in AWS year before I got my signature on the previous one was what got my signature status in AWS, and I forgot the name of the couple, something in Greta Marble Award out of that. So,
let's talk about this. The AWS, I'm betting, is the American Watercolor Society.
Good bet.
And why does one want to be a signature member of the American Watercolor Society?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Once we're in it, it's sort of like you're compelled. So, but there's several. I think Stewart's in it. Ian Stewart, Bill Hook. A bunch of old architectural illustrators that I know are in it. Not to mention all the great, just normal watercolorists that have learned as watercolorists and as painters.
Do you think it is a organization that the aspiring
most
people who are getting more into doing it should consider if they are watercolorists? Do you find?
You want to. I mean, it's tough to get in, and especially tough to get signature stuff. So, first time I got in was several years ago, and then you have to get in two more times to be able to get signatureship, and they're pretty picky about it. So, sometimes I don't agree with them, but it's that's the way it is. But that's the way with anything. So, yeah. So,
all right, Richard, answer that question. RT was wondering the lack of bleeding in the thin lines. How?
It's bleeding. You just can't see it. You have to be. It's a fairly decent size. Well, not great for some of the sizes the oil painters do, but it's a half sheet. But it's once it's dry underneath it, unless you've got opaques under it, which is I already told you about. You don't want to put opaques under anything. Opaques will bleed anything on top of them out. So if you put down the yellow ochre, if you put down a cadmium yellow underneath on these yellows you see there, and then you go over it with a burnt out value that takes on the warmth of the sun coming through, like the reds and the oranges and so on, then it will bleed. If you want it to bleed, that'll be perfect. But if you don't want it to bleed, that's what you do. So,
interesting.
So yeah, but this was a fun one. There's a lot of overlay of some opaques into regular watercolors. So I'll come in, and there may be a cadmium yellow in some of these places, or a really light yellow that's a cadmium light yellow in some of these where I've kind of lost an edge I want back, and I'll come in with a bit of that on the brush and throw that. And then down in the lower left, you can see some diagonal stripes or streaks going from up, from
right
up on the left to down on the middle right. And, so those are the fan brush, but they're dipped in the cadmiums. So, they'll make those.
So it's the fan brush dipped in the cadmiums, but that is underneath the.
It's on top.
Or on top.
Yeah, that's they say you're cheating at that point, and in effect you are if you're a purist. But reality is, even Transparent Watercolor Society will allow cadmiums. So
wait a minute, there's a Transparent Watercolor Society?
Yeah, they're really picky about it.
Is there an opaque watercolor society?
Yes, gouache.
So. Good Lord. I'm going to start.
I don't think they call it opaque watercolor, but you can put any kind of watercolor into these watercolor shows. So it could be an acrylic. Acrylics looked at as a watercolor as well.
Oh, I wouldn't countenance that.
I don't either, but you can use it transparently.
Sneary is affectionately known by the Rattlesnake Gang as the lovable curmudgeon.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, wait a minute. One thing, I just want to pontificate for a moment on this again. It's so masterful because there's so much intelligence in this painting, and yet it's so understated. I mean, it's incredible composition just of the light and dark, positive, negative shapes.
That's what drew me to it.
The lighter values at the top going to very, very dark values, very intense values toward the bottom. And then you've also got kind of a reference to the subject matter in the fact that you've got the light pouring through at the bottom, which is inherently going to be reminiscent of a blast furnace, of the furnace itself, of what used to happen here. I mean, it's pretty darn brilliant, if I do say so myself. But I guess I get to because I didn't paint it.
It's your show.
Yeah. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. So this is at the Cape Ann Plein Air.
Yeah, this is at Howard's place.
Yeah. Now I wanted these two slides to be next to one another because it's again, you're playing with that the subject matter and then light behind. So you've got this composition that is greatly abetted by indoor-outdoor dichotomy.
Right.
So go for it, Richard. Talk to us here.
Well, I've painted in Howard Burnham's Boat Works every year for the last 3 or 4, it seems like, in Cape Ann Plein Air, and it's a collection of eclectic things all over the place. You've been there, and It's like there's no end to things to paint in this place. And I painted inside here 2 or 3 times at least. And this was this. I did one as well the year before, or 2 years before, before COVID, and it had a boat in it and was much wider view, and the same windows were in it. But those windows are always appealing because they contrast against everything else. If I wanted to make more of it, I probably would have darkened everything else, and focused more on what was outside, and I may try that at some point, but there's so much going on. There's clamps and everything you can see hung across the window up at the middle, on the upper half, so to speak, above center, and down below a little bit. And then they continue to the left, and ropes and lights strung. And, I think one is up at the top and the lights there. And they're just like, auto mechanics lights. They hang under the hood so they can see things. And Howard's always leaving it a mess. And he was kind of, had some issues last year health-wise, and couldn't keep things up as much. So there was more of a mess than normal, but his messes are just magic. And I'm drawn to complexity. I love complexity. I normally overdo it, and but I've been learning over time here to do it a little bit better, but still get it. And that's kind of the issue of this, is somehow to get across all of the crap that Howard has sitting around here. Bless his heart.
Bless his heart. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. This one I call horse's ass. You call 96.
Yeah.
So this is done at San Angelo. This is the quick paint.
This was at the calf roping in San Angelo, and it's a quick paint, so it's within 2 hours. And I think I started a little late because I couldn't find what I wanted, and but it was going along pretty good, and I didn't turn it in. And Barbara was really interested in the thing, but Fran and Tom, Greg had come by, or at least Fran did, and she saw it. And so I got all done, and everybody asked, where's my painting? I said, I wasn't finished with it. So I said, I'm going to go back and, finish it over at my host's house. I figured I had about 20, 30 minutes and I'd be done with it. And I was. And so Tom and Fran bought it. But this was the calf roping. And this guy, 96 was his number. I don't know what his name was because the owner never came by, but he was there for emergencies in the corral. So in the calf roping, if there's a, rider or something going on that they needed somebody else to come in, they'd hop on 96 and go in there and deal with it. Maybe he'd pull out on a a kind of a flat wood piece that they do to, if a calf's injured, they'll pull them off to the end so they can deal with, getting them.
So this is done. This is done from life.
Yes, this is plein air painting. Other than the last 20 minutes. So
how did you do? There's a guy on a horse, and I know he didn't stop for an hour and a half.
I just had to catch it. So Lon knows that. Lon does that better than anybody. So
Lon does it very, very well. Lon, we could do an entire program on Lon's calf roping painting. Oh man, amazing. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. Oh, here we are in Cumberland, Maryland. Cumberland, Maryland, ladies and gentlemen, the CSX railroad yards there, where they have an awful lot of locomotives.
And they hate artists.
They do not want the artists around. Was this the bridge? There's a bridge overpass?
Yeah, this was in the one of the control towers in the middle of the yard.
How'd you get in there?
Well, Ray Hazard, Ray.
Yeah.
Ray's pastel artist, a really good one, and he and I have been friends for years. And any case, we quite often paint together. And he was painting over there a day or so before, and ended up a guy that works there came out, talked to him and stuff, and made a comment. I can get you into the yards further. So he lets me know. So next day or so, we go out, and the guy drives us out to one of the control towers in the middle of the yard. Normally, everybody's stuck down way at the end where those little yellow buildings are and beyond to the right. And that's all they can get to.
Right.
But they took us in themselves, and we went up to the top of the tower and painted there for the whole afternoon. So it took a while because I think we went back the next day because we didn't have enough time. So I probably 2 trips to do this. So.
And again, this is from life. This is not using photo reference.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And once again, I'm assuming not a lot of straight edge, which is
hell no.
Oh man. See, Richard Sneary has very little respect for us artists who use squeegees. I'll tell you that.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
It's a great straight line.
It's a wonderful straight line. But anyway,
I'd use my side of my flat brush quite often to do just that. So
right.
So.
But magnificent. And then let's have the final slide. The final slide, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Mr. Sneary did not even include this in ones for us to consider, but I snuck it in there. He says it's from his old illustration days. I say it's from when we did a show at the Brattleboro Museum in 2015 called Boxcars. It was the railroad landscape. This is a piece I asked to be in that show. The thing that kills me about this painting, there's several things. One, it uses a device that I like to use a lot that I would point out to people, which is having a light side and a dark side of the painting. You know, so the far distance is much lighter in value than the near right. It also, the human eye loves repeating shapes. And that very often when I teach classes, people will be drawn to subject matter like bridges or with the girders, the repeating girders, or sides of buildings with 28 identical windows. And I point out to people that is something that they need to approach with great foreknowledge or great caution, because getting everything to line up, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, is virtually impossible. So the drawing on this is masterful. But the other thing that Betty Sue and I were talking about this earlier is the juxtaposition of the man-made elements of the girders and the beams tying the top girder and the bottom girders together. This is a through truss bridge, right?
Right.
But juxtaposing that with the dance, the calligraphic dance of all the branches. So you've got, they're both dark form against light, but they have they share a common context of dark against light, but the language that they're speaking is so totally different. And I think you just do that masterfully, again, without hitting us over the head with it. So tell us a little about this now that I've fanboyed out on you for a bit.
Well, this one is a studio piece. This is up in Manhattan on the Kansas River, the Caw, as we refer to it. But I laid this out off of the photo that I'd taken of it. But I do it freehand. I don't use a straight edge on the photo. You just follow the lines. But I don't take a long time. This one probably took a while. But this was several years ago when I did this. I don't remember when that boxcar thing was. At least
it was 2015. It was 2015, so it was before that.
A while. And so I may have had this already started or done. I think I'd finished this before that. So it was, I think it was up the gallery up in Manhattan for a while. I don't remember. But so I think I still have it actually. So
that's what you say. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking of acquiring a Sneary, one could do worse than getting this one. If I sell another painting this week, I think I'm going to buy this. I love it.
I'd be honored to have it there at your place. So.
Well, it is a magnificent piece. Betty Sue, why don't you make our heads very big again? Oh, she's waving. All right. Well, I guess, hang on a second. Private chat. Can we jump back and answer? A couple of questions about CSX Rail Yard came in just as we switched that. Can we go back and answer? Of course we can. Let us go back.
Okay.
I never am looking at the private chat. I am such a terrible host. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Carol Fulkerson asks, in the background trees.
Did I drop a second color in? Background. No, I just blend them together, sort of. I mean, there's probably more than one wash on it, so I can vary it a little bit. But I'm not sure what she's looking for there. But hopefully that answers it. Do you do any masking? No, I do not.
And what's your thought about that? Why do you
It's a pain in the neck. Now that I won't say you can't do it, because Cindy Barron, fabulous watercolorist and oil painter, she does it all the time in plein air, in competition with that masking fluid. I have no idea how she has the patience to do it, but my guess is I've watched her paint before. She's very quick and knows what the heck she's doing.
Yeah, she really knows. She
Like
really
she did,
knows.
I'd probably try it. So
Yeah. So Cindy Barron is another master of voodoo, and a very different voodoo than you do. But
one of the only watercolor and oil painters that actually, sometimes at a distance, you can't tell whether it's a watercolor or an oil. She uses the same color palette. It's magnificent stuff. You should do.
I will invite her to be on one time. She's a wonderful person and a wonderful painter.
Yeah.
But Richard, this has been a joy having you with us today. And you've got a pretty full schedule of plein air events coming up this spring and summer. Starting with Shadows on the Teche, is that the first one?
Yeah.
And then going to Lighthouse in Tequesta, Florida. And then going where?
New Bern, North Carolina.
New Bern, North Carolina.
It's on the coast.
So if any of our viewers are near those areas, I urge you to go out and catch Richard painting in the field. It's wonderful to watch him, and one can learn so much by just being a fly on the wall. And if you've got a full website at richardsneary.com. And then do you have stuff at galleries around the country as well?
Got some stuff down in Texas and up in Boulder, Colorado. So.
All right. Well, I hope to cross paths with you at several plein air events, and I hope to keep seeing your magnificent work. I think it's you bring so much to American watercolor. I'm so impressed with your work.
I'm honored to be on, Charlie. Thanks for asking.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great week.